Hey there guys, and welcome to another Factorio Base Tour. I'm Xterminator, and thank you for joining me. And today we are going over an absolutely massive 20,000 science per minute megabase by Swolar. They actually submitted a 10,000 science per minute base I toured about a year ago, and back with a 20,000 science per minute base. We are in 018, 18.22, I believe currently is what I'm in. And this base is completely vanilla. Now, a few things non-vanilla were used to make it, which I'll go into in a minute, but the base runs completely vanilla. And as you can see, we are at basically 60 UPS, and that is the significant thing about this base. The fact that we are making 20,000 science, in some cases even a little more, 20,000 of every single science pack per minute on average at 60 UPS. And you can see here, 50-hour graph, 20k a minute average on every single science pack here, which is insane. And if we look, on my computer in particular, I actually have a little bit of room to spare. It goes up and down based on what's being made. In single player, I believe you start to drop below 60 at about 16, or 16.6 update. I may be off by a little bit there, but I have a tiny bit to spare. It is going up and down. That's why my UPS and stuff is jumping a little bit. But for the most part, this is at 60 UPS. Now, how is this achieved? This is actually a really interesting strategy, and I think this is the future, at least with what we have to work with now. This is the future of making massive production megabases, because this, I think, is the best, most efficient way to do it. We're standing in a production cell here, and this section makes 187 science per minute. Pretty minimal. But what they've done is they've stamped down tons of these. They've stamped down 107 of these, as you can see across the map. There's 107. You can just see them all lined here. They're pretty much all identical. This is train fueling, but everything here, they're all the same. So I'm only going to show you one because the rest, they're all exactly the same. But this is how we're achieving this. I don't personally believe that you could get to 20,000 science per minute, or even really that close, if you just built a gigantic all interconnected megabase. I just don't think it would be possible because it would just not be nearly as efficient. So we're going to go over each individual section of this and go over some really, really interesting things and tricks and strategies they use to make this so optimized and make this so impressive. So first thing I should mention is this was built with the map editor and creative mode in the ore patches were spawned in, obviously, and they're basically infinite. Now, some people may consider that cheating. It depends on your playstyle. Personally, I do not, simply because for a base this size, the big achievement and big feat here is being able to have a base that actually runs consistently at 20,000 science per minute, and also being able to make it work efficiently enough and well enough and steadily enough to pump that amount of science out at 60 UPS, basically always. That is what's really impressive to me on this base, in other mega bases of this size. Not necessarily, I don't care so much about if you built the base from collecting all the resources to make all the machines and stuff, because in the grand scheme of things, the material cost for this was a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really minuscule compared to what you're actually consuming consistently with making 20,000 of each science per minute, which you'll see when we look further in the production graph here. And then spawning in the ore patches, again, I'm not really considering that cheaty or anything. I mean, technically, I guess it is, but again, I think the feat is actually being able to have your stuff run well enough consistently, rather than just constantly going out and spending your entire time just securing outposts because you're burning through them so fast you can't keep up. But the base itself is run on vanilla. There's no Factorio Extended, no Bobs, no Angels, no nothing, like no modified machines or anything. I am running with 0 mods right now. So the production is 100% vanilla. So let's start at the base of things, with the mining and the smelting. One thing that makes this very efficient, and this is a fairly well-known strategy in Mega Basers at this point, is direct smelting and insertion into trains with miners. Now, these look like this is a little interesting. I've noticed these ones going into the furnace are kind of laggy, and I'm not sure if that has to do with maybe the output or the input backing up here or something. We're obviously not lagging, but these seem laggy, whereas ones that are mining directly into the trains rather than smelters seem to work fine. I'm not entirely sure what's causing this. I thought maybe they were wired, but they're not actually wired up, so I don't know exactly what this issue is or what's causing this, but it does seem to work. So what's happening is speed modules all the way. Why is it speed modules and now prod modules? Because we have 2,000% mining productivity already, which is insane. 2,000% mining productivity, 200 has been researched. We're currently researching robot worker speed 21, which is 32 million science packs. So we don't need any productivity modules. Just speed it all the way. And these are being mined directly into furnaces, so you don't need bots for this. You don't need inserters for this. It is direct. And then we have inserters going from the smelters here into chests, and then obviously from the chest into the train. So you do need 2 inserters per. Can't really get much lower to that unless you didn't have a buffer, but you basically have to have a buffer if you want this to work. Now these inserters are set with some circuit conditions here. These are actually based on copper, so it looks like potentially this is maybe stopping it from working based on an amount of copper. If copper is greater than 0, then you'll let these work, basically, as I'm stuck inside here. And then these, direct insert into trains. So this is what the smelting looks like, identical for copper. If we come over to the right here, you can see a little bit of a change on that. So over here, we actually have the miners mining directly into the train for ore. And this is then brought, as you can see, this train's going to leave. This is then brought over to here for steel. And just to show you, for some reason, these miners seem to work perfectly fine. Again, I don't know, maybe it's just mining into the furnaces messes them up a little bit. Or it's because it's like hitting the buffer, internal buffer. But I mean, you can see this is cranking this out. Like, look how fast this is filling up. Insane. And this guy sits here and waits until he can go. A lot of these stations are smart stations, so it will really only send trains when it actually needs them. It'll call them when it needs them. So if we follow this guy up here, he pulled into one of these, and he comes in and unloads ore into these iron or steel chests, which then goes and smelts into iron and is then directly inserted into steel. So again, no bots, no belts, minimal trains. You're not transporting iron plate in a train to steel production. It's all centrally made right here. Now these output inserters, I believe are clocked. We'll go into the clocking here a little bit. It's used a lot in the actual production area, particularly with circuits and science and stuff, which really helps with this being able to run at 60 UPS. Okay, so steel, pretty straightforward, goes into a little box here, and then goes into another box. I think this is just to close the distance here, to close that gap, and this is better than using bots in this case. There's a few conclusions we can draw from this, that inserters in small distances, having inserters pass through boxes is actually more efficient than bots or belts for small distances like this. And this is passed in, and you can actually see we have stations on both sides here, in 2 different stations. So you saw this pulled in one, and then once those wagons were empty, it pulled forward to another to empty the rest. And then a train actually comes in from this other direction to this station and picks up the steel, which is a really interesting way of doing it. So we kind of have a in-out multiple direction setup here. So steel load, we have dum-dum, that's a kind of dummy station, I suppose, and then iron 1, iron ore 2, and this guy, once he empties, he'll pull forward to this station. Again, this I believe is the only steel for each one of these units. And if we go over here and just watch this guy, in a minute he should pull forward, there we go, and empty into here and then be on his way. Okay, so that's that. So then we have copper, which comes in again from up top here, same exact thing as the iron, and then we have the iron come in from the left there, and they pull into these stations, which, again, since content circuit network to the train so they can be used for wait conditions, and this is all sent through the circuit network, and, they're kind of just told, wait here until something needs these materials. Okay, so they pull in here. You can see one's in here at the moment, this copper train. Steel delivers over here, and it is unloaded, try not to get run over, it is unloaded directly into boxes on the right-hand side here, you can see. Okay, now this guy is wired up as well, and then this is for iron, obviously, and these are sent, some are on belts, some are passed directly through chests, and we are using a little bit of bots, so we're actually using, he's using 3 different methods here. And what's super impressive is this unit that does 187 science per minute, and everything needed for that is, let me zoom out a little if I can find a roboport here. This is only using 86 logistic bots in this entire unit. Obviously our bots are super fast, we have a ton of cargo capacity, max cargo capacity, and they're really, really quick. But only needing 86 of these, a lot of that is due to just the efficiency in which this is built. So this unloads, drops into here, and then this guy is controlled by wires, which will tell him basically when to unload stuff and when to send it on belts. And then we come over, and this is where we really see these inserter clocks work. So some of these inserters are backed up. Some of these. Okay, so if we look at this, what this is gonna basically be is that what inserter clocking does, at least in this instance, is it makes it so the inserter will only swing when it can pick up 12 items or as close to 12 as possible. So this is moving really quickly. It's kind of difficult to see. There was another one I was looking at earlier that had a much better example of this. So this guy, you can see here, he just placed 12 in there. And of course this is going into blue circuits, but you'll see once he swings again, it's going to be 12 or very close to it again. And then we go 12 again. And this is on all the inserters for circuits and science packs specifically. And there's a little bit of a different clocking method on smelting, which is a bit more difficult to understand. I am not a circuit network expert by any means, but this guy's at 157. You see when he swings 174, that is close to 12-ish. And what this does is this makes it so then basically your inserters aren't swinging needlessly. So instead of inserters swinging like with 1 item, which is pretty wasteful, and then 4 items, and 3 items, and 8 items, so on and so forth, they only swing when they can actually carry basically what their entire hand can hold. And what this also does is this makes the bots more efficient. You may not think so initially, but if this is dumping 12 items into a chest, it means when a bot comes and picks it up, the bot can pick up its full cargo size worth, which I believe in this case at max cargo size is 4, because they can carry 1 plus 3 extra. So that really, really helps with bot efficiency, because if this were only dumping 2 items in the chest and a bot came and picked it up, the bot's only using half of its inventory, and that's making extra bot trips. So having this do it this way means that bots are pretty much almost always guaranteed to pick up their entire cargo capacity worth when they come and get this, which really, really saves on bot trips and just the general number of bots you need. And then belts are used intermittently in here. So belts and inserters in some cases here are actually more efficient than bots, which personally I did not actually think was the case. My impression was that bots were pretty much always more efficient. But there are cases here where belts and inserters are actually better, and I think to me that's really interesting, because that's not what I would have anticipated. I think bots are still really strong in some instances here, but mixing in the belts is actually a really good idea, because they did optimize belts, so that's really good. And this, again, produces everything. I'm not going to look at every single building. It's pretty you know, vanilla, pretty straightforward. We all know the recipes for this stuff. Belts, you know, you can't obviously use prod mods on things like belt inserters, but prod mods are being used, of course, in all the science, everything they can be used in. Labs, of course, as well. And then we have a rocket silo down here. One rocket silo per unit. And then oil is similar. So this guy is just cranking out oil so fast, it's like lagging the machine graphic. These guys are cranking these out. And it looks like these inserters are potentially clocked as well on this. If we take a look here, this should theoretically insert in... Okay, it wasn't quite 12s. These maybe... I think these are clocked a little bit differently. This is the other type of clock he was talking about. But the inserter clocking is a massive, massive thing right here. So if we, again, these are all the same. We don't need to look at every single one. They're all the same. This solar field, so let's talk about the power usage. This uses nearly 200 gigawatts of power. This is actually insane. This is here at is this a terawatt? Is that the correct term? Absolutely absurd amount of power. 3.2 million solar panels, 2.7 million accumulators, and obviously solar. Best way to go here. If you were to try to do this with nuclear, you would definitely not be anywhere near 60 UPS. Your performance would just be wrecked due to the pipes and all the entities and stuff. Because solar and accumulators, they basically all count as one entity. So it's basically just not even counted for the most part. And we can see what's using the power here. 130,000 beacons. That's just an absurd amount. 10,000 assemblers, 17,000 furnaces. 1,000 roboports, which actually is not that high considering how much stuff is here. Very efficient roboport use. If we look at the placement of these, this is pretty decent. Really only covering what it needs to. You know, there's none over here, so it won't make any weird bot trips like that. You know, we're not spamming them. They're placed out fairly equidistant in most cases, except down here maybe. And overall, really, really impressive. So the science, if we just look a little further into this, the science is being dumped into chests and moved by bots. It looks like a lot of these intermediates are moved by belts. So like iron plate is moved by belts to some locations. If we were to follow this down, this is moved by bots or belt to gears. That makes sense. You know, gears take a ton of iron. I think that's probably more efficient than having bots try to do it. You know, accumulators are thrown onto belts here. It looks like most circuits are probably put in the logistics network. But then where we need high amount of circuits, say, for example, circuits into blue circuits, they're, of course, directly inserted because direct insertion is going to be better than belts or bots, whatever you can do it. And this guy's just dumping into here. Pretty straightforward in that sense. Now, let's look at production. So this is making, we are producing 1.3 to 1.4 million iron a minute. And a little over 1 million, 1.1 million copper a minute. Over 600,000 circuits a minute. Let's look at the 1 minute, so this isn't jumping around as much. 150k red circuits, 21,000 blue circuits a minute. And to me, this is where this is what really impresses me, more than the materials that were spent to put into the base or ore patches being spawned in or not. Being able to consistently keep these production numbers up is what is so incredibly impressive to me. Now we do have, of course, a rail going through here, and this is just specifically for the fuel train. So if we come over here, we have a fuel station. So this enables and disables. Based on how much fuel is in here. If there's enough fuel, it should disable, which means it's going to turn it off in the thing here. You can see nothing needs fuel. All the stations are turned off. And if we were to turn, well, they are on. You can see all the fuel stations are turned off because they all have fuel. Once one runs low, it'll turn the station on, and this train will go deliver that fuel. And pretty straightforward there. That's a very, very commonly used system for fuel. And that's the only interconnecting here. Again, none of these go to other places. So, this is not sending like copper to some other unit or bringing in something from other unit. These are all completely self-contained aside from the fuel, which again, really, really helps with the efficiency. All the stone we possibly need is supplied by a total of 4 miners because of the mining productivity. Pretty nuts. this is belted over. It maybe trains could have worked. Belting is definitely more efficient than bots in this case. Trains, maybe, I don't know. I feel like trains maybe would have been good, but they did so much more testing than I've done. So I trust the judgment of using a belt here. Now, if we go look at this clock a little bit, you can see green science popping up there. Again, circuit networking is not my strong suit, guys, so I do apologize for not being able to deeply explain this. For those of you who understand the circuit network will probably just understand this by looking at it. So this is where the clocking goes on. If we look here, you can see this is counting up, this is ticks, and at some point this should reset. So this is counting up in ticks on this decider combinator. And then it hits 1K. It's continuing to go up. And then it resets. It resets somewhere in there. I'd imagine at like 1.2, 1.3 thousand. And this is, you can see there, it's giving the signal for, or receiving signal for circuits. And yeah, so basically this is just counting in ticks to figure out when the inserters should swing, based on the time it takes to make the stuff and such. Again, this is a little beyond my capability. I apologize, I can't explain this super in depth. I do not understand circuit networks well enough to understand exactly what's going on here, but I do understand the concept of clocking, and that is something that if you plan to build a really big mega base, you definitely need to look into because it's super, super important. So, we're basically saying signal T, 1.3K, like I said. If it's less than that output, the input count of T, and this guy looks like the output is wired back to the input. And this is T equals 1. So this is this one here is a clock. You can see these are just clocks for items. So this is a clock for rod control units. Red science, this one's clocked a little bit differently, obviously. And I would assume this is based on the time it takes to make them and such. The science, yeah, because you can see here, red science is 450. Whereas this one's 640, and batteries are 19,000. A little bit of a different calculation there. I think that's a different type of clock. So this, 3.2K, you can kind of get an idea here. But all these are basically for different items. And then we have some more going on up here, which is a bit different as well. Looking at these, this is again beyond my knowledge, but if you do know circuit networks, this actually probably is not that complicated. So green circuits, copper, steel, and there we go. So solar, this is an interesting solar build, very straightforward, nothing fancy going on here. I would assume this is the correct solar ratio, or as best as it can get. We could easily do a calculation here, 3.2 divided by, or 2.7, sorry, divided by 3.2. Other way around, one way or the other. It would be the other way around. 2.7 divided by 3.2 is 0.843. The correct ratio, perfect ratio, is 0.84. So basically exactly what it should be for the accumulators to all get charged and stuff in time. And this base, man, if we look at the all-time, so, oh, that's not production. If we look at the all-time here, we can see we've produced 6 billion copper cable, nearly 5 billion iron, nearly 4 billion copper, 2 billion circuits, 1 billion plastic, a little more than 500 million steel, basically 500 million red circuits, an insane amount of rail. Rail is needed for science, remember. And we can look at the science pack numbers, so 68 million of every single science pack. Now, over the all-time graph, this is not 20K, just because near the beginning, everything wasn't working exactly as it should have. But if we look here at, 20-hour, 250, 50 hours, always usually the good standard to look at for this is the 20,000 on the 50-hour graph. Just absolutely crazy. Fluids, I fear to look at this, 15 billion oil produced, almost 10 billion petroleum. Pollution is interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Kills, nothing there, obviously. I think they've actually turned pollution off for performance reasons. That's why there's no pollution. Makes sense. And I think that's pretty much it, guys. Let's take a look here. We've launched 68,247 rockets so far. Obviously, there's bases that have launched way more than that, but you know, this base actually hasn't been running for all that long. If we go to save this, this has been running for not even 100 hours, which is not long at all. The bases that have launched, you know, a couple 100,000 rockets or whatever, have been running many times longer than that. So if we were to let this run, you know, for another 200 hours, we would see those numbers creeping up there real quick. And I think that's going to do it, guys. This is pretty much everything. Just really interesting techniques here, use things I never would have thought of. The clocking is a very good thing to save performance. The mixture of belts and bots is something that I have been thinking about, and I think a lot of other mega basers have been considering. This is actually probably the most efficient way you can do it, instead of just going full one or the other. If you're going for pure efficiency and game performance, efficiency, mixing direct insertion with bots, with belts, is I think the golden standard here for this, because you know, there's some cases where one thing is just going to be better than the other, and then other cases where it's not. So you should use each thing where it's best, and then obviously the things that aren't good in that area, don't use them. You know, so overall, absolutely insanely impressive base. This, I think, this is the biggest, this is the highest production vanilla mega base I've ever seen, I believe. I don't recall there being a bigger one. If there is, I would love to tour it. Or if there, rather I should say, the biggest one I've seen at 60 UPS. I'm sure people have maybe tried bigger and are running at like 20 at UPS or something. But the fact this runs at pretty much 60 is just insane to me. You know, also part of that is due to the game's optimization, what the devs have done, how far they've come with optimizing the game. Obviously, a lot of it depends on your hardware. You know, if you're running, you know, some older hardware and stuff, you're probably not going to get 60 UPS. But, you know, the Swolar, the creator of this, their hardware is a bit different than mine, and we're both getting 60 UPS basically. So, you know, it will stay there with a little bit of variation. But I think that's gonna do it, guys. Overall, this is just so impressive to me. I'm just blown away, honestly, by how impressive this is, to be able to make this much production at 60 UPS. If we take it, we didn't quite look at the trains here. So we have iron unload, and then we go to iron 2-1, iron 2-2, which are the loading outposts here, and then iron RR, which is right here, 1. So if circuit blue signal equals 4, this is basically just set on inactivity. If there's any inactivity, then it leaves, and then the unload is blue circuit is, what does this signal mean? I forget. Equal. I'm not good at this stuff. I don't remember what this signal means. I know these are like greater and less than and equal to. I forget what this one means, but I like the train coloring as well. There's not too much more to go over. This is, you know, with all the cells being the same, there's not a ton to look at. You know, coal. I love the fact you only need 5 miners for all the coal. With that productivity, that's just what happens. Bonuses, we could just look at the bonuses real quick here. Research speed, that's standard. Movement speed, 1215%. Obviously, with this insane bot speed, that helps a lot. Max inserter capacity, you do need that. Don't really need upgrades here. For military, there's, you know, there's no biters here. And, yeah, I think that's going to do it, guys. Anyway, really impressive. I hope you guys enjoyed this and are impressed as I am. I'm really glad to have been able to tour this. There is a Reddit post where Swolar goes into much more detail on stuff. I will link that in the description if you guys are interested. And also in that post is the save file if you guys want to take a look at this yourselves. Again, you don't need any mods or anything. Completely vanilla. 0.18 though, you will need. Or 0.17 maybe will work because they didn't change science recipes, I don't think. But I would go with 0.18 just to be safe. And I think that's going to do it, guys. If you have any thoughts, more questions, I will do my best to answer. If it's circuit network related stuff, I probably won't be able to answer. That is just not my area of expertise. But if there's other stuff you have questions about that I didn't cover, unrelated to circuit network, I would be happy to answer, and Swolar maybe will be in the comments as well, able to answer, or you can check out the Reddit post and probably find the info you need there. It's very, very detailed. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This is a massive solar network. This is insane. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.